Before we start, just a few words of introduction. This Menaglim Schus Hayidei Zakai, people from the Vad, involved in other areas, came up with this idea to have a Mishmar night, and it's an unbelievable thing. The Mishmar night is somehow preparing oneself for Shabbos with Ruchnius. As a Bacher, I remember there were many different phases, different times in one's life, and there were those Erev Shabbosim that before Shabbos come to the Beis Medrash early and learn before Shabbos started. The whole Shabbos was a different Shabbos. Thursday night, the week is winding down. People are getting ready for Shabbos. A person learns on Thursday night, getting ready for Shabbos, his Shabbos will be different, in a good way. His Shabbos will be different. And remember, it's a big schus. This program, which we're Mitzvah Shem trying to launch, at least a pilot trip tonight, is focused, Siyata Deshmaya, to speak about questions that most of them probably will have come my way, that not only are vexing, but they give some kind of an insight into things that we flirt with throughout the days, the weeks, the months, the years, and we don't really touch on them in a serious manner. And it's refreshing to know that there's really nothing new out there. All of the tightness, all of the ideas, all of the questions have source material. Sometimes one has to be from the Gedolei Hador to find the source material. But when we find it and it becomes relevant and we can discuss it in the modern day environment, I think it gives everybody an adrenaline rush on the currentness of Torah, how what was, is, and will always be. That's the purpose, at least of this shir, that I was decided to speak about. First, I mentioned that the shir is L'Nishmas Leah Chaya Bas David, that it's her yard site tonight, and her family sponsoring full and part the event, the tircha that's involved, and the Yesod, the Shir HaYesod is very, very important. And I would just like to mention something which is a little humbling. It's not part of the Shir. Reb Chaim Volozhiner started Yeshivas Volozhin, and more or less at the same time, the Beis Ephraim started his yeshiva, and his yeshiva more or less went bust shortly after it started. And he met Reb Chaim Volozhiner, and he asked him, why was your yeshiva successful, got off the ground? In fact, that was the mother of all the yeshivas of Europe from the time of the Vilna Gaon until the close of Europe. And my yeshiva just closed. And he said as follows. He asked him, what did you do when you started your yeshiva? The Beis Medrash said, we made a Chanukas Habayis, we made a Suda, and we celebrated that we're doing something for Torah. And Reb Chaim Volozhiner said, that's wonderful, but that's not what we did when we started Volozhin. When we started Volozhin, we fasted beforehand. Someone's going to start something ruchni, so we fasted beforehand in order that it should be infused with enough kedusha that should have longevity. I guess tonight we're all fasting beforehand. but it's important, I'm just mentioning this, it's important that we keep in mind that we're starting something off, and gufa basa reishe greira, that the whole project will fall in step after tonight, so to speak, the opening night, and it has a special kedusha, special chashivas for the limud HaTorah that's going to happen here. not mistaken, 2 Fridays ago, about 9:45 in the morning, I got a phone call, which I get many times, anonymous phone calls, and the person sounds very uptight, and he says to me, Rabbi, I'm standing outside my doctor's office. I have an important doctor's appointment, and the mirpa'ah, the clinic, is in a binyan migurim, in a residential building, and there's a big sign outside that we, the tenants of this building, protest and do not let this clinic be in our property, and whoever trespasses to go there through the knisa is a ganev and a gazlan. He says, Rabbi, I have an important appointment. May I go in or not? That was a question I asked, a regular, everyday question. And
It's a normal Friday.
right. Anyways, there's a question that I was asked. And the source sheet tonight will touch on some of the questions that are relevant to answer this question. And I think that we will all, from what we learned tonight, have a little bit of an idea of what does it mean to have rights as a tenant in a building and wrongs as a tenant in a building. Where is the wiggle room? Where isn't the wiggle room? And that's what we're going to discuss. The bottom line is problems of shchenim is a major piece of work in Shulchan Aruch, and it's codified in the Gemara. We have over here in the store sheet the makoros from some of the subjects that are relevant, and I would just like mention one of the subjects which I think that many people would find tantalizing. What is the Torah's view on it? I don't know if we're going to get to it tonight, but maybe if we do, I'm going to have these guys as my neighbors, so there's going to be a little bit more noise. It's not going to be so clean. My apartment is going to become undesirable. When I sell it, it's going to be worth less than the exact same apartment next door. Do I have to take a financial loss by having this edifice be full of a mirpa'ah? Forget about the hilchos shchenim of the noise, the hilchos shchenim of some place can even discuss disease, that people come to the doctor, they don't come because they're feeling well, and depends how old they are, and they could spread disease. There's many questions. All the questions, I can't say all, but many of the questions are discussed, and indeed we have to figure out what are rights, what are wrongs, and then there's another question. And if you're right, should you exercise your right? Those are the questions which we're going to study tonight on the source sheet, and I guess that's should be without tzlacha.
Okay.
The story goes that Rebbe Apyan came to yeshiva to give a sichas musar, and it was supposed to start at like 7 o'clock. He walks in 2 to 7 before his sicha. They made a musar seder, and the place was booming in learning. He was usually a punctual fellow. It came 7 o'clock. He did not get out of the seat. Everybody continued learning. 7:07, 7:10. Everybody's still learning. 7:15. Finally, he gets up. As soon as he gets up, the place becomes deathly silent. And he comments, if I would have known all I had to do was stand up here to get everybody to stop, I would have gotten up on time. But you weren't obviously really engrossed. I got up, and Baruch Hashem, everybody was still learning, so I'm happy that we spent a few minutes extra just to hop around a little bit more preparation for this year. The main focus is the Gemara. The Gemara says clearly that people who bring noise pollution into a serene neighborhood, we have a right to stop that kind of activity because it ruins our quality of life. Let's just call it like that. The problem is that one of the things which it mentions is a roife, and a little bit further down in Shulchan Aruch, it says all kinds of mitzvah activities, or seemingly possibly all kinds of mitzvah activities, may not be curtailed, and we have to let them flourish. And the question, which is the main point which I would like to speak about today, at least the starting main point, is refuah a mitzvah or not? So here we have on the source sheet, on the bottom of the first side, the Torah says clearly, Nitna reshus l'roy pelarapois umitzvahi. So whoever can figure out the gematria, the word umitzvahi and mitzvah is more or less the same, and therefore it's clear that the Torah holds that it's a mitzvah for someone to be marapeh. For a doctor to be marapeh is a mitzvah. If it's a mitzvah, according to the halacha in Sif Gimel, that says there's something that's a mitzvah, one does not have a right to stop somebody. So, indeed, we have a problem, we have a steer over here in Shulchan Aruch. This is the issue, the core issue over here that has to be dealt with. So, in truth, as we write in the source sheet, whether it's really a mitzvah or not a mitzvah for someone to be healed or not is actually a machlokes. V'rapo yirape, mikan shenitten rishus l'roy fel rapois. That's a begrudging, we let him do it. It doesn't yet necessarily say that there's a mitzvah. And not only that, we have the Ramban on the second side, which looks a little bit askew at somebody who uses the doctor. A person is supposed to be botech in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the way to go. That's the way to go. That's not what we do.
Doesn't he say only when there's a navi or something?
No, you have to see the whole Ramban. And there's a famous story, I just mentioned the famous story with the Vilna Gaon. So he came to his brother-in-law's house, and he saw there was a doctor there, and he said, Ma yasa roife v'beis yirei Elokim. And indeed, there is a machlokes about this, about whether one should or shouldn't use a doctor, but it also has to do with where one is in their emun and bitachon level, which that's not the purpose of the shir. The purpose of the shir is just making aware that there is such an opinion. However, the Rashba, top of the second side, he makes it clear also that there's a mitzvah. A person has his health issues, you have to go to the doctor helps you with your health issues, and you're supposed to go and take care of yourself, and it's a mitzvah to be marapeh. You're doing a mitzvah, he's doing a mitzvah. This is mitzvah activity, and therefore, l'chayra, we have a serious problem. This issue is dealt with in the Sma, whether the word Reifa over here actually means a doctor, a regular doctor or not. That's his way of dealing with the issue. When will we say that it's a mitzvah? But my focus is on the Taz. The Taz's words, there's a lot of discussion amongst the Poskim, and the middle of it, the third line on the source sheet, towards the end. V'nir the Hachas Rabbeinu Betur. Mili the mitzvah. You're going lechalik tzedakah or lispalel basara. What's called a mitzvah? Giving out tzedakah or davening with a minyan. Lahoiros, this is giving us an insight. The davka be'inan mitzvah hatoli b'tziruf anoshim. We need not just all mitzvahs are permitted to be done at the expense of neighbors. It has to be those that are need tziruf anoshim, kemo elo dechoshev. Ma she'en ken kashe'ev shelo lelech lebeis hanoshim shetzrichim lakach, because the doctor says, why should I go make house calls? Have them come to me. The mitzvah is that the patient should be served. So get in your car, go to the patient and serve him. The mitzvah doesn't demand a nature of having an office or a practice. So therefore, the mitzvah doesn't demand that we impinge on the quality of the life of the neighbors. And therefore, the Taz says that though it's a mitzvah, not all mitzvahs are included. Yes, refuah is a mitzvah, but refuah is excluded anyways. This is the opinion of the Taz. And we will soon see that this idea which he writes, he actually, so to speak, he burns the candle from more than one end at one time. He says, one, it has to be something that needs people congregating together. And two, it has to be that there's no option. I have an option. Build a shul. Have a matnas. So the second part says that if there's an option, then there's no heter of mitzvah. And that would seemingly possibly take away the heter of a shul. So I'm just showing you that there are two reasons that are actually said in the Taz, and we have to figure out what the Shvil Hazav is to understand what the Taz is saying. What is the baseline to come to a conclusion on this Taz? To heal somebody's a mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? Why is it a mitzvah? A lot of times we say, it's a mitzvah to do this, mitzvah to do that, and we just take it as a cliche and we accept it. Where on the source sheet does it tell us where the mitzvah is? What is the mitzvah? So there are two different sources that tell us what the mitzvah is. There's one, as the Tur says, at the end, the second page, the last line of the second to the last piece, he says, "V'hi b'chlal pikuach nefesh." Just like saving somebody's life is permissible, it's included in that the mitzvah of performing medicine on a sick person. That's one source. The other source, where did that go? The Gemara in Baba Kama, the Gemara tells us that there's a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, and Hashavas Aveda, it's not on the sheet. No, you didn't make it there. It's not there. The Gemara says Hashivoi Saloi. Here it is. The Gemara is in Baba Kama, Daf Pei Aleph on the base. The Gemara says Hodar Aisehi. When someone's in danger, there's a chiyuv d'oraisa to save him. They're speaking about someone's being chased and he could be going to be killed. The Tanya Hashivoisoi, Bashovas Aved is Aloch Hashivoisoi. Hashivoisoi is Gufo Minayin. How do you know you have to save a person's body? And there's the Tamla Hashivoisoi, out of the extra vav that you learn that you have to save a person's body. The Tosefta on that Mishnah says that means if you see somebody lost on the way because he doesn't have ways, and you get him to where he wants to go, you're Makai in the mitzvah of Hashivai Saloi. The seeming implication, and according to many of the Mefarshim, any kind of restoration of a person's proper position is included in the mitzvah of Hashavas Haveda. If that's true, then we can have some interesting idea what's going on. Sometimes we have medical conditions that are what are called mechushim, things that bother you a little bit. Person has arthritis, bursitis, he's in pain. So I know nowadays pain is a whole industry. I'd like to get into that industry. Pain is an industry, but it's not pikuach nefesh. It's just debilitating and it's not wonderful. So if the source of refuah is from the idea of pikuach nefesh, it would be a long shot to say that you have a right, the tzorich mitzvah of pikuach nefesh, to open a pain clinic in a private house. If it's for people who have infectious diseases, or even according to some, as the halacha in Hilchos Shabbos is, a person who has a tooth infection is called a infection which could lead to sakonas nefashos. So the average doctor in the average clinic probably carries in it at least a 50% chance of things which are pikuach nefesh, but not necessarily everything. Person's going to make a training center, people have therapy, all these kinds of things, they're not pikuach nefesh. So not necessarily would the heter of refuah, which is a mitzvah, apply. If you learn that the heter is hashivoi soloi, restoring the person to normal working condition, then it would be included in that also, because the mitzvah is to return the person to where he is. I'd like to say over a story which I think illustrates this point, and the story that Daiti has to be burnt into everybody's mind. The Chazon Ish was invited to Hashem Brachos. And there was a no-show, he didn't come. So people went to his house, and they found the Chazon Ish with an older couple making mathematical equations. And when he finished, the Chazon Ish told the people who came to get him, I'm not going to apologize that I'm late and with these people. These people are Nitzulei HaShoah, and their needs are Klal Yisrael's needs. I was doing a shlichus for you, your obligation to take care of them. I'm not late for your simcha. I was doing your job on the way. We're going to get back to this in a minute. This is a very important idea. I'm just going to, I don't have so much time over here. All right, and now I'd like to take this as follows. Halacha l'maisa, there's a great machlokes amongst many of the poskim whether the shchenim have a right to stop a clinic from being opened in their building. That's a shaila of lechatchila, can you stop it? Let's say the clinic is already there, and in the case which I discussed, got a phone call, I have a doctor's appointment, and this big sign, straight to Gehenna if you walk through this door. Right? This big sign that you cannot go in. What is the halacha? So there are those that say, in this case in particular, my particular case, if the mitzvah is learned out of Hashivoi Soloi, it's a Hashavas Aveda Dika mitzvah, so then all of the people who live there also have an obligation to help him out. It's not the doctor's mitzvah, this is Klal Yisrael's mitzvah. And therefore, when the choila is here in front of us, and he needs the doctor's attention, it's incumbent upon them to facilitate for it to happen. And in that case in particular, there's more of a reason to allow the patient to go and see the doctor. Even if it's not a pikuach nefesh derivative of refuah. The Chassam Sofer, in his tshuva, that discusses this issue, and many of the offshoots of this issue. He says something which reflects this idea. A person has a mitzvah to do. Because you have a mitzvah to do, I have to suffer? Do your mitzvahs in your own place. Don't bother me. And the Chassam Sofer says, the mitzvah is not mutal on the neighbor that he has to suffer because of the noise of the ribuy people coming in, because somebody has a mitzvah to do. And the Chassam Sofer is speaking about an interesting idea. The halacha says in Or Chaim that making a parnos is a mitzvah. So arguably, according to that thought, anybody can open any kind of store, anywheres, and say, I'm being oisik b'mitzvah. You don't have to give any tzedakah because oisik b'mitzvah patur min mitzvah. Right? Anyways, that was a joke. Anyways, so here we have an idea which is very important, that sometimes what looks like his problem is your problem. This is as far as we're talking about the case which I was asked. I'm not right now discussing, this answer which I gave, which is part of the answer which I gave. Here we have the situation, he's going to miss his appointment, and who knows what's going to happen. I don't know if you ever heard of Kupat Cholim. Anyways, so here we have a situation that is going to be a real loss if he doesn't get into his appointment, and this is part of the reason in that situation in particular, I was makel and allowed that person to walk through that walkway, even though there was that sign in front of the building. That's as far as that exact issue is concerned. I would just like to mention a Shevet Halevi, which is here on the source sheet, which is very important. Many times, people ask questions. The last piece on the second side, and they speak about their rights. I mentioned to a chavrus of mine in Yerushalayim that I'm going to say over this Shevet Halevi. Didn't click with him. They say, now I understand. You have somebody who opened up a puton, a gan, in their building. And it's run by the area, and the area pays 3 to 5 times what regular schiris is, and this guy is making a killing in your building. And you say, this is his mashal, you say, what do you mean they make so much noise and this, and they have all these kind of tinnitus, which really could be good tinnitus, but really deep down, many times, it's just that, he's making it off of my situation. Says the Shevet Halevi. I'm going to close with this. Kol oisam niskei shchedim. Well, you have a question in niskei shchedim. Sherishoyim la'akev, that the halacha is one is allowed to stop the neighbor from pursuing whatever he wants to do. Him zeh davka kamishlaya galya shezeh asibo amitis l'snagdusai. Does it have to be that is the authentic reason that you don't want him to do it? Or you just don't want? I don't want to have the headache. It doesn't really bother me. Lo rotze. Okay? Person doesn't want. So Rav Wosner writes that even though you have a technical right, but you only have a right to use your right if it indeed is bothering you. If it's not bothering you, even though you have the right, you don't have the right to use it. Good. A good Chodesh, a good Shabbos.